Excellencies, honorable mayors, distinguished panelists, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you from wherever you are connecting to this last session of Daring Cities 2020. My name is Yunus Arikan. I'm the Director of Global Advocacy at ICLE Local Governments for Sustainability. ICLE is a global network of more than 1,700 local and regional governments worldwide from more than 120 countries. Our mission is to drive local action towards low emissions, resilient, nature-based, circular and equitable sustainable urban development. Over the past 3 weeks, I was introducing you the concept of Daring Cities. Daring Cities is an initiative of ICLE together with City of Bonn, the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, in collaboration with our partners, German Federal Ministries of Environment and Development Cooperation. To this session, I would not have to introduce you the concept of Daring Cities because today we will be hearing what we have achieved at 3 weeks of mobilization. So in this regard, I'm delighted that this session will be consisting of the first round where we will have the outcomes, but also the key messages to the upcoming processes and events over the next couple of months in participation with the guidance and with the insights from the UN, national governments, and local governments. In the last part of the session, we will have a dialogue, a stakeholders dialogue with colleagues who would who would discuss about the role of civil society and the role of public enforcement in the implementation of Daring Cities outcome. I'm delighted to announce you that this first part of the session, which is the dialogue on the outcomes of Daring Cities and connection to the global agendas, will be led by Ms. Marina Ponti, Director of SDG Action Campaign. One of the main goals of Daring Cities in convening this event was also to improve our collaboration with the UN institutions based in Bonn, where ICLE World Secretariat is based. In that regard, Bonn is becoming the sustainability hub of the UN. So for anyone included or involved in the sustainability business, they are very familiar with SDG Action Campaign as they are the institution developing fantastic communication, capacity building, awareness raising, and partnership tools to bridge the UN agenda with the citizens' initiatives. Therefore, we are delighted to have SDG Action Campaign, and in particular, the director, Ms. Marina Ponti. Therefore, without further ado, I would like to hand over to Ms. Ponti so that she will take us through the rest of the agenda. Ms. Ponti, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Yunus. Thank you for the kind words. And let me say good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all of you. And it's such a pleasure and an honor for me to be part of this event and be part of the ICLE family and to be closing this very important 3 weeks in engagement. And I want to really commend you, Yunus, and your team for your tireless motivation and passion and for your ability to convene such a long and insightful and passionate event despite the difficulty and the challenges which we are all facing. But let me also commend you and the City of Bonn and all your partners for choosing Daring City, because I think this concept embedded the real the challenges and the spirit of the time we are all living. And let me now say that before introducing the amazing array of speakers that you have put forward for the closing ceremony, I would like just to draw your attention on a few remarks that I would like to share with you, helping to situate the specific and the time we are living together. So the COVID-19 pandemic is a stark reminder of how connected we are and how far we are from being resilient, inclusive, and sustainable society that leave no one behind. COVID-19 is also reminding us in the more astonishing way on the importance of working together across border, across sector, across generation, to address the challenge that affect humanity now. And it's not just the pandemic, but it's climate change, is also, inequalities and many more. This is a moment of great risk, but as any moment of great risk is also a moment of great opportunities. We are, as we call it at the UN SDG Action Campaign, at a turning point for people and planet. We must reimagine a new world, one that is more just, one that is more equal and more sustainable, one that leaves no one behind. This moment demands great urgency and greater accountability. It also calls on us to be more ambitious as never before and embrace the transformative actions that are possible to achieve the agenda for 2030. And this is why now I understand, I really appreciate the daring city concept. As in many dark moments in history, challenges brings opportunity for those who dare. And we at the Action Campaign see three. First of all, the first opportunity is that now transformative change is possible. In the past, many were skeptical that the transformative change that were required to achieve the agenda for 2030 were too costly, too difficult, and they were too disruptive. Well, now, as we see, leaders across sector and across the world are back at the drawing board to really redesign how to hug the curve, redesign our society, our life, restart our economy. So now the space is there to change and to make the bold decisions that are necessary. Second is about individual action. I mean, you see on the back on the screen, the butterfly. And we believe, of course, and we always believe in the transformative change that individual action can lead to. But until COVID, many people were again skeptical on how my individual action can really help to address a global challenge. COVID again is a reminder that in front of a pandemic, which is affecting everyone, every government, from the most powerful to the most vulnerable, the only strategy we have is individual action. So somehow we will be able to build on this experience and have an audience of people prepared to then, after we dealt with the pandemic, to implement the individual behavior shift that are required to go towards sustainable cities. It's through a different mobility, it's through different work condition and actually ways of working, through different travel and the way we consume. So we believe that also individual action will be another ally and another opportunity. And the third is about global solidarity. Again, of course, at the Action Campaign, we always promote the importance of global solidarity and we attach great value, but many people were skeptical again. But through the pandemic, we saw how people immediately came out and helped each other across generation, gender, sector, and we saw that there is a new impetus for actually working together to address all these challenges. So we see that this is, again, something that the cities and ICLEI and other with us, we can really build upon. And we know already what needs to be done. We know that we need to ban carbon subsidies and cutting emission and investing in renewable energy and in green jobs, giving access to land, water. So the list is there. We just need to make it happen. And in doing so, we need to do it together. And we have 10 years ahead of us, and we can turn it around using our language. And as Mandela taught us, it seems impossible until it's done. So now let me, close my remark and kind of start my role as a master of ceremony. And I'm really extremely glad that the first guest that I will be introducing is a very long-standing friend of the campaign and more broadly of the UN Bonn city and hub for sustainability. So the mayor of Bonn, Mr. Ashok Sridharan, is also the president of ICLEI, as was reminded yesterday, just now, sorry. And allow me to use the opportunity to really thank you, Lord Mayor, not only for the support to the UN and of the sustainability, but also for the support to the Sustainable Development Goals. And as many of you may know, Bonn recently published a local voluntary review, really spelling out what are the action and the plans to make Bonn a city which is really achieving the SDG, not just the words, but action. So thank you, Mayor, for all the support, for your commitment, and really have Bonn as a kind of a leader and a model for more other cities. Lord Mayor, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening to the daring cities all over the world and to their partners in ambition. And thank you, Marina, for highlighting how cities can turn the world around with new thinking. One of my favorite quotes by Albert Einstein says, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Daring Cities is based on our new thinking. With this daring thinking, we will take on the climate emergency and the challenges of land, nature, and health alike. Or, as Right Livelihood laureate Tony Rinaudo, the Australian forest maker, worded it, "Our action is not shaping landscapes, but shaping mindscapes." I'm deeply grateful for the new mindscapes evolving from the daring cities, for this demonstration of leadership and determination. And at this moment, I'm genuinely optimistic. Thank you, my fellow leaders all around the world, for showing the world how new thinking can turn the world around. ICLEI Secretary General Gino van Begin will give you an overview of the most inspiring moments and substantial takeaways from daring cities later in this session. Let me first commend our many partners, in particular the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, and the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, as well as the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. Daring Cities has taken off amidst a limbo of challenges, starting with the climate emergency, our threatened biodiversity, and the loss of fertile land, and of course, the global pandemic. But there is hope. Shining bright through our daring cities is the fact that we are in an era of innovation, collaboration, and alliances. We will take the momentum of this conference and, inspired, for example, by the post-pandemic redesign initiative piloted by Japan, seize the opportunities in our challenges. We will base our strategies and action on evidence and continue to manifest a culture of multi-level, multi-stakeholder collaboration in the spirit of the 2030 Agenda and, of course, the Paris Agreement. Our daring attitude will inspire our ambition and action in all global agendas, climate, resilience, nature and land alike, underpinned by the alliances already forged. Daring Cities 2020 has reflected a momentum, and ICLEI and Bonn will make sure to keep this momentum going. Because this decade between 2020 and 2030 must be the decade of sustainability action, and because we are running out of time, daring is the only attitude that will get us where we need and where we want to go. Had we been able to gather together in person, I would have asked you to go home to your cities and continue being change makers, change brokers, and change advocates with stubborn optimism, as Christiana Figueres called it in her countdown talk at TEDx Daring Cities. But you are already home. You are already in the place that needs your daring work the most. The first edition of Daring Cities as a virtual forum has exceeded all my expectations as a space for exchange, learning, and accelerating action. Thank you, participants in all continents and time zones, and thank you to the leaders who have brought their energy and leadership to the last 3 weeks. We shall continue to dare ourselves to more, act better, and lead together. Let's continue to be daring cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for explaining and go a little bit more deep into this concept, and for your commitment to really inspire other mayors to turn around their cities and their policy to make sustainability and the goals a reality. And I think that now we can really start looking at the future, and this closing ceremony wants to highlight the two very important events that will take place next year. We'll have the COP26, which will be co-chaired by the Italian and the UK government, and we're privileged to have with us both government who will be chairing the COP Youth and also the conference itself in November. So it's really very important to hear from them their vision and the challenges that we all need to overcome together. So without any further ado, let me give the floor to the Minister Sergio Costa, which is the Italian Minister for Environment, Land and Sea Protection. Signor Ministro, you have the floor.
I extend a warm greeting to all of you. I'm particularly pleased to speak at this event dedicated to the role of cities and local and regional governments in the fight against climate change. Cities and territories are extraordinary laboratories for the formulation and implementation of incisive, ambitious and inclusive policies, and can make a fundamental contribution to achieving the objectives of the Paris Agreement. On a local scale, it is possible to address challenges in a targeted way, leveraging the strengths of the territories. It is possible to build participative and innovative models, as well as to form an active and aware citizenship. It is possible to create cutting-edge strategies and projects for the reduction of emissions, for the circular economy, and for the harmonious integration between humankind and nature. We have also some epochal challenges to face at this time. The pandemic, with its dramatic consequences, has made even more evident the importance of not altering natural balances, of building more resilient societies, of basing responses on science and solidarity. We now have the opportunity to move towards a green recovery, focused on the fight against climate change and the preservation of biodiversity. This is an objective that the European Union is strongly committed to, and which implies a courageous rethinking of the current economic paradigm.
È un obiettivo a cui l'Unione Europea sta puntando con forte impegno e che implica un coraggioso ripensamento del paradigma economico corrente. Alla luce di queste considerazioni,
in the light of these considerations, we're preparing the next international meetings of the Convention on Climate Change, which, due to the pandemic, have been postponed to next year and which see us as protagonists. Italy, the United Kingdom's partner country in the presidency of COP26, will host the preparatory events for COP26, which we will organize in Milan from 30 September to October 2021. An event dedicated to young people, Youth for Climate, which will offer up approximately 400 young people with a gender balance from all over the world the opportunity to develop concrete proposals to bring to the COP negotiators table.
Da tutto il mondo, la possibilità di elaborare proposte concrete da portare al tavolo dei negoziatori della COP. e la pre-COP che intende...
And the pre-COP event, which intends to address the main negotiating issues and the most relevant political aspects in an inclusive and balanced way, also incorporating the requests of young people, with the aim of facilitating the identification of sharing points and therefore the success of the following COP in Glasgow. We have good reason to be optimistic, as shown by the fact that we are working towards the adoption by the European Union of ambitious emission reduction targets by 2030, with cuts of at least 55%. And even outside Europe, we're seeing important signs of increased efforts to combat climate change. It is a path in which everyone must play their part, and in which local governments, as well as the networks that unite them, such as ICLEI, have a key role to play.
Virtuosi che uniscono come i CLEI hanno un ruolo fondamentale da giocare. I governi del territorio sono il primo e principale anello di congiunzione tra i cittadini.
Local governments are the first and main link between citizens and governments, and in this perspective they've always been valid in Italy. As part of the post-COVID-19 green reconstruction, we have adopted important measures that see cities as protagonists. We provided for an eco-bonus in addition to the incentive already in place to improve the energy and seismic conditions of buildings, which not only reimburse the cost of building regeneration, which is expected to amount to a total of €6 billion, but even rewards the citizens who support them. Without building a single additional cubic meter, we provide resources to radically renovate Italian buildings, drastically reducing emissions from these sources.
Gli edifici italiani, riducendo drasticamente le emissioni di queste fonti. Abbiamo introdotto un
We've introduced a voucher, financing it with a total of €210 million, which allows citizens to buy a bike, classical assisted pedaling, or a kick scooter, obtaining a contribution of up to €500 and 60% of the cost. We thus encourage sustainable forms of transport that guarantee people's rights to mobility in urban areas in the face of the restriction of local public transport due to COVID-19. We've allocated €250 million to finance the creation, prolongation and upgrading of dedicated lanes for local public transport and cycle paths aimed at reducing time of transport of local public transport and increase the safety of people who choose alternative mobility. We have activated collaborations agreements with Italian regions, provinces and municipalities aimed at supporting the development of regional and provincial sustainable development strategies and city programs for the implementation of Agenda 2030.
E provinciali di sviluppo sostenibile ed agenda metropolitane per l'attuazione dell'Agenda 2030. La visione che ci guida, in sostanza.
The vision that guides us is in fact a radical rethinking of urban centers to make them more resilient to climate change, increasing, among other things, green spaces and introducing nature-based solutions. In this perspective, we decided to start an experimental program of urban and peri-urban forestation in metropolitan cities, financing it with €30 million for 2020 and 2021. In the last days, I signed the implementing decree allowing involved people the presentation of projects aimed at tree planting in urban areas. And that's not all. Cities and regions might also become key players, and we will underline at pre-COP in Milan, in reduced waste production, polluting emissions and environmental risks, and strong engines of circular economy, environmental solidarity and sustainable development. Generating change means acting on the territories. It means creating a close link between local and global dimensions. We have plenty of room for collaboration over the next few decades. We must seize it fully with commitment and courage. Thank you.
E coraggio. Grazie a tutti.
Thank you. Thank you, Signor Ministro, for your radical thinking and for your commitment to, first of all, put the spotlight on what local government and regional government can do to be agent maker and to change and shift the policies and behavior and make them, more sustainable. Also, thank you for reminding us and for being optimistic of the European Union commitment to cut emission by more than 55% by 2030. This is something very important that hopefully will be delivered and confirmed next year. And also, lastly, thank you for co-hosting and hosting the COP Youth, where we will be cooperating, and there is a lot of expectation. And as you said, young people need to have a greater, say in defining what will be the planet that they will be inheriting. So really, thank you. And now let me turn to the host of the COP26. And allow me to introduce Alok Sharma, who is the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy of the Government of the United Kingdom, and the UK COP26 President designate. You have the floor.
At the start of the 1800s, just 3% of the world's population lived in cities. Today, that has risen to over 50%. And by 2050, around 70% of the world's population is expected to be living in a city. Despite being home to just over half of the world's population, cities are responsible for 75% of its carbon emissions. That is why they're absolutely vital in the fight against climate change. The actions cities take now and how they grow will either accelerate us towards climate catastrophe or enable us to stem the tide. Throughout human history, cities have been at the forefront of economic and social progress, from cities like Mohenjo-daro in the Indus Valley, to Hangzhou at the time of the Song dynasty, to Renaissance Florence and contemporary cities in Silicon Valley. And when it comes to climate action, we are seeing such leadership again. From Accra to Bogota, from Delhi to Milan, and from Seoul to Zurich, over 450 cities across the world have signed up to Race to Zero. They've committed to reach net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest. Others have gone further. Glasgow has set a target of becoming carbon neutral by 2030. Across the globe, cities are showing the world how to make such targets a reality. Guangzhou has electrified its entire bus network. Delhi has closed its most polluting power station and is subsidizing rickshaw drivers to go electric. Johannesburg is generating power from methane harvested from landfill sites, whilst Oslo's climate budget counts CO2 like money, making emissions reductions the day-to-day task of each and every city department. These sort of initiatives to reduce emissions are critical, but they're not the only work to be done. We know we must also restore nature if we are to turn the tide against climate change and build our resilience to rising global temperatures. In both these areas, cities are already making progress. For example, Buenos Aires has converted a former landfill site into wetlands, providing a home to hundreds of birds and plant species and helping to fortify the city against floods and extreme heat in the process. Ahead of COP26, I'm urging countries, cities, regions around the world to focus their efforts on nature-based solutions like these. Because nature is one of the 5 areas we've identified where we need strong action internationally. The others are clean energy, clean transport, adaptation and resilience, and finance. Progress in each of these areas is vital if we're to build a climate-resilient, zero-carbon global economy, as are strong emissions reductions targets. So with our partners Italy, we are urging all countries to come forward with ambitious, nationally determined contributions and to commit to net zero targets. We're also asking all cities and regions to sign up to Race to Zero. That means committing to reach net zero by 2050 at the latest, having a plan to get there, and, importantly, reporting on your progress. The UK's presidency of the G7 and Italy's the G20 will reinforce our aims for COP26. Because in the fight against climate change, everyone must play their part. National governments alone cannot achieve the change we need. Cities, regions, businesses, and civil society must be all on board. We will only achieve our ambitions if we work together. That is why these groups will play an integral part in success at COP26. And it's why the UK is funding initiatives like the Climate Leadership in Cities programme, supporting cities in developing countries to create climate action plans in line with the Paris Agreement, and crucially, to implement them. Ladies and gentlemen, mayors and leaders in local and regional government have the power to determine the future of our planet. Let's increase ambition, work on solutions, and take action now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for your passion, for your commitment, and also for reminding us on the importance of work together. You mentioned, government, you mentioned the private sector, you mentioned individual, of course, you mentioned, local and regional government, and you mentioned that everyone should do more, and maybe align with the theme of this conference, everyone should dare more. And you also gave us some specific, points and entry point for engagement. You mentioned the Race to Zero campaign, which is a very important campaign that all local and regional government should join to really show their commitment to sustainability. And you also mentioned some very important global event that will take place next year, again, with Italy and the UK, the G7 and the G20, which also will be very important to go further in our commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals and to the climate agenda. So thank you again, and let me now move to a next segment of today's closing. And let me say that both the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate emergency, which we were experiencing before, have really highlighted the need for community to revisit the value of living with nature. And now we will be listening to UN leaders, as well as ICLEI Global Ambassador, on the efforts to craft a new deal between humankind and nature in the coming months. Let me first start with Mr. Ibrahim Tia. He is the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, and this is one of the leading institutions that we are proud to have here at UN Bonn. Mr. Thea, you have the floor.
Dear friends, I would like to thank you for inviting me to speak today. Daring Cities, a perfect, bold, and forward-looking title for these discussions. Fyodor Dostoevsky once wrote, and I quote, "Power is given only to those who dare to lower themselves and pick it up. Only one thing matters, one thing, to be able to dare." Yes, we, including me, sometimes tend to present cities as one of the main problems of our times. Most of us live in cities, and this number is fast increasing. Cities cover only 2% of the Earth's surface, but consume 75% of the Earth's resources. With the most rapid rates of urban expansion, Asia and Africa are projected to experience 80% of the global cropland loss due to unplanned urban expansion. The population and footprint of cities everywhere are growing fast, but this is not the only narrative we could or should present. Last year, at the UNCCD Conference of the Parties, we co-organized with ICLEI a local and regional government day. Participants highlighted policy, social and economic solutions and way forward. They underscored, in particular, the necessity for rural and urban communities to act as partners and not as competitors. The New Delhi Declaration, a major outcome of the conference, made a clear mention of local and, for the first time, sustainable cities. In the past weeks, at Daring Cities, representatives from local and regional governments from everywhere around the world have showed us that they are part of and providing solutions to our challenges. Cities are on the front line. They are the closest to the citizens, and they have been asked to provide responses. This is even more true today. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to social and economic crisis. Lockdowns, export bans, and quarantines are restricting food supply chains and purchasing power, while labor and input shortages in some areas are disrupting food production, processing, and distribution. But cities are daring to act, and with Dostoevsky's words, to pick up the power. And to my mind, the key success factor moving forward is to consider opportunities in rural areas and sustainable cities as going hand in hand. There are multiple opportunities at multiple levels. For instance, sustainable management of land and water go together as part and parcel of resilience and integrated land use planning. It is one of the most promising opportunities that needs to be harnessed on priority. A clear focus could be put on limiting the excessive natural resource consumption patterns that lead to land degradation. Circular economy systems should be fully considered and mainstreamed into the integrated urban planning. Another opportunity would be to nurture the synergy between agricultural production and urban-based enterprises. Why should Lagos in Nigeria or Dakar in Senegal import food when they sit close to a rural gold mine for agri-production? Vibrant local economies and local production chains can help everyone. The question of generating employment and livelihoods opportunities in rural and urban areas at the same time is becoming critical. Our destinies are tied closely together. There is incredible potential for inducing technological innovation and new development paradigm for local resources management and sustainable value chains if we are not shy about grasping it. 2021 will be critically important for the world. It will see the conferences of the parties of the 3 Rio Conventions, the launch of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and the organization of the UN Food Systems Summit. Moving forward, we will need to marshal our efforts and resources to secure rural livelihoods and create green jobs, support community resilience, and maintain the sustainable delivery of ecosystem services from the land. I would like to thank ICLEI and its president, the mayor of Bonn, for the tremendous work and successful collaboration over the last years. And we look forward to continuing to work with the upcoming mayor of Bonn, our beautiful host city. The UNCCD remains ready to support the cities which will dare to take action on land. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you for your intervention. And also, thank you for emphasizing the importance of urban and rural community to come together to find joint solution rather than perceiving each other as competitor for scarce and limited, resources. So I think this was a very, very important takeaway. And also, thank you for reminding us that 2020 will not only be a key year because of the COP, but for other very important, conferences that will be dealing with other aspects of sustainability. And now, let me go across the Atlantic and ask to join another UN leader, Ms. Elizabeth Maruba Marema. She's the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity based in Montreal, Canada. Ms. Maruma Marema, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, greetings to you all. I would like to congratulate ICLEI and the city of Bonn for successfully organizing this year's Daring Cities events, spanning over 3 weeks of exchange, reflecting today's climate crisis and related challenges, and the knowledge as well as the creativity of agents of change. The 10 years over which ICLEI has organized its Resilient Cities events coincides with the 2011-2020 Plan of Action on Subnational Governments, Cities, and other local authorities for biodiversity, endorsed by the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity at its 10th Conference of the Parties in 2010. The Plan of Action has its genesis 2 years earlier at our 9th Conference of the Parties in Bonn. Bonn also hosted the first summit of cities and subnational governments in conjunction with our Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. I'm happy that the organizers and many participants in this year's event continue to be so active in the Convention on Biological Diversity matters. The main message today is to emphasize the need for urgent and transformative change, which builds on the fact that biodiversity and climate are intrinsically linked, and that biodiversity brings solution to climate, and climate is central issue for biodiversity. Next year, in Kunming, China, at the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity is expected to adopt a post-2020 global biodiversity framework, which will include goals, targets, and enabling mechanism to provide humanity with a clear and implementable path towards the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Given that our societies and economies depend on biodiversity, and that the crisis of climate change and biodiversity are interlinked, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will be aligned and supportive of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. The relation between climate change and biodiversity, as well as the need for whole of government and whole of society approaches to address them, were emphasized by many speakers at the UN Summit on Biodiversity end of last month. Subnational governments, cities, and other local authorities have been active in the preparation of the new biodiversity framework and will have an essential role in its implementation and monitoring its progress. You hold a critical mandate for actions to address climate change, conserve and sustainably use biodiversity, and assure sustainable land management. You also provide important setting for bringing together multiple stakeholders and for integrating biodiversity into the mainstreaming of planning. At the Daring Cities high-level event convened by ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center on 22nd October, we heard from the Secretary for Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform of the Scottish Government, who dared cities to sign the Edinburgh Declaration on post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We also heard from the Mayor of Montreal, who made a call for a renewed Convention on Biological Diversity decision on local and subnational governments to be adopted at the next Conference of the Parties next year, and dared cities to join the Cities with Nature initiative and share your commitments on biodiversity. Several other regional and municipal leaders, including the governor of Aichi Prefecture in Japan, supported the call for the renewed Convention on Biological Diversity decision and for cities to sign the Edinburgh Declaration. We also heard from the Mayor of Kunming, host city of our Conference of the Parties next year, and the 7th Summit of Cities and Subnational Governments. The only way towards a climate-friendly and resilient future for us all as an increasingly urban species is to protect and sustainably use nature as our own main tool for development, climate, and health. This means improving energy efficiency, adopting sustainable consumption and production, nurturing green spaces, landscapes, and ecosystem services upon which cities and their citizens depend. Even beyond that, The very texture of our cities should be alive, a porous and smart combination of infrastructure and function, just as it is with coral reefs and rainforests on which we ultimately depend. Let us dare to think, plan, and manage in this way. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks. Thank you for your passion and your enthusiasm, and also for reminding us of the linkages between climate change and biodiversity, and also for reminding us of the importance of the whole of government approaches to our common challenges. And I think that your commitment to integrate through the Agenda 2030 health, biodiversity, climate change, as well as other very important priority is really important. So thank you for reminding us. And also thank you for highlighting some of the mayor and some of the initiatives that are daring and that are committed to do even more. So I think we need those who dare, and we need them, many more to come forward, next year and beyond. And now let me stay on your side of the ocean. And actually, it's really a privilege to give the floor now to the mayor of Montreal, Madame Valérie Plante, who is really a pioneer in terms of sustainability and commitment, and also plays an important role in ICLEI as an ambassador for local biodiversity. So, Madame Mayer, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président d'ICLEI, chers ministres, chers collègues, mairesses et maires, distingués représentants des Nations Unies et de la société civile, chères participantes et participants. Tout d'abord, je tiens à féliciter le maire de Bonn et président d'ICLEI, mon collègue Ashok Sridhan, ainsi que toute son équipe pour l'organisation de cette conférence ambitieuse appelée Daring Cities. Parce que de l'audace et de l'ambition, il en faut. Pour faire face à la crise sanitaire actuelle, nous devons plus que jamais redoubler de vision et d'audace et proposer des stratégies innovantes pour assurer une relance verte, durable et inclusive. La pandémie de la COVID-19, en plus de bousculer nos habitudes et notre économie, nous invite à une réflexion sérieuse quant à notre rapport avec la nature. Il est grand temps de repenser la relation entre les humains et la nature et de poursuivre un développement qui respecte les limites de notre planète. Les villes sont à l'avant-scène de cette réflexion et de cette mobilisation et sont déjà en mode action. Aujourd'hui, je souhaite vous entretenir plus spécifiquement de notre lutte pour la préservation de nos écosystèmes et de la biodiversité. Nous sommes en effet à une étape cruciale quant aux engagements et aux actions que la communauté internationale doit prendre en matière de biodiversité. La COP21 a été une étape majeure en matière de changement climatique. La prochaine COP 15 sur la biodiversité est appelée à être un moment tout aussi déterminant. La communauté internationale sera en effet appelée à adopter un nouveau cadre mondial sur la biodiversité. Un cadre dans lequel tous les acteurs concernés devront prendre des engagements qui vont mener à des actions à la hauteur des défis auxquels nous sommes confrontés. Parmi ces acteurs se trouvent les villes et les gouvernements régionaux et locaux. À Montréal, par exemple, nous sommes en voie de créer le plus grand parc municipal au Canada, le Grand Parc de l'Ouest. Cette action s'inscrit dans l'esprit des Daring Cities, car, croyez-moi, ce projet ne va pas se concrétiser sans obstacle, puisqu'il suppose un changement en termes de développement urbain. Partout à travers le monde, les villes mettent en pratique des initiatives favorisant la biodiversité. Je vous invite à visiter le site Cities with Nature, si vous ne l'avez pas déjà fait, pour vous en convaincre et pour vous inspirer. Nous revenons au chemin qui nous mènera à la COP 15. Au cours de la dernière année, des villes, gouvernements régionaux et locaux se sont mobilisés à l'invitation du gouvernement d'Écosse dans le cadre du processus d'Édimbourg. Cela a abouti à la déclaration d'Édimbourg dans laquelle nos aspirations et nos engagements quant à la COP sont exprimés. Puis, les Nations unies ont tenu un sommet sur la biodiversité le 30 septembre dernier. J'ai eu l'honneur d'y prendre la parole à titre d'ambassadrice mondiale d'ICLEI pour la biodiversité locale. J'y ai explicitement offert la collaboration des villes et des gouvernements locaux et régionaux à l'ONU, à tous ses États membres ainsi copartenaires de la société civile. Dans la foulée de ce sommet, nous avons été témoins d'une belle mobilisation. C'est ainsi que 77 pays ont signé l'engagement des dirigeants pour la nature. Cette déclaration a également été officiellement appuyée par de nombreuses organisations de la société civile ainsi que par ICLEI. Et maintenant, quelles sont les prochaines étapes? Nous allons continuer de nous activer dans les préparatifs de la COP 15. Il nous faudra aussi, chacun d'entre nous, maintenir les liens et assurer notre collaboration avec nos gouvernements nationaux respectifs. De mon côté, je souligne la relation très productive que Montréal entretient avec le gouvernement du Québec et le gouvernement du Canada à cet effet. Il y aura bien sûr de nombreuses sessions de préparation et de négociation au cours des prochains mois en vue d'élaborer le cadre sur la biodiversité. Soyez assurés que les villes et les gouvernements locaux et régionaux veilleront au grain. Et lorsque les conditions seront réunies pour tenir la COP 15, les villes seront présentes. Nous nous réunirons d'ailleurs dans le cadre d'un sommet des gouvernements locaux et infranationaux. Et nous voudrons également être à la table des discussions et compter sur nous pour faire partie de la solution. Finalement, qu'attendons-nous comme résultat de la COP 15? Un cadre sur la biodiversité qui soit ambitieux et qui mènera à des actions concrètes, ainsi qu'une reconnaissance du rôle des villes et des gouvernements régionaux et locaux, notamment par le biais d'une décision spécifique à cet effet. Voilà donc notre feuille de route, ambitieuse certes, mais aussi nécessaire. Il en va de l'avenir de notre planète, de notre qualité de vie et de l'avenir des générations futures. Je vous remercie et j'espère continuer de collaborer étroitement avec vous en route pour la COP 15.
Thank you, Madame Mayor. Thank you for your ambition, thank you for your passion, and thank you for reminding us again of the critical importance not only of working together across constituency, but really linking city with regional government and national government. I think these synergies are extremely important. And also thank you for highlighting some of the challenges ahead and also some of the action that cities like Montreal are taking, to make their cities and the world more sustainable and inclusive. And now it's really a pleasure to actually go back to ICLEI, to the Secretary General, Gino Van Begin, because we would really like to hear from him some of the key outcome of these 3 weeks exciting process and also some of his reflection. And I really hope he feels extremely proud and, with what's happening and what's happening also today. Gino, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Marina. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, colleagues and friends, as the Secretary General of ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, and on behalf of our Daring Cities partners, the Federal City of Bonn, the German Federal Ministries for Environment and of Economic Cooperation and Development, as well as the state of North Rhine-Westphalia here in Germany, it is my pleasure and my privilege to summarize some of the highlights and outcomes of Daring Cities 2020. Daring Cities 2020 has been the largest online gathering of the urban community on the climate emergency to date. Here is how we did it. Over the past 3 weeks, we hosted 100 sessions resulting in more than 200 hours of dialogue and featuring more than 400 speakers, including the United Nations Secretary General, 8 ministers, 7 UN agency chiefs, and more than 150 mayors, governors, councillors, and other urban leaders around the world. More than 4,500 participants from over 150 countries engaged in our program. In the year in which the United Nations Conference of the Parties, the so-called COPs, on climate and biodiversity have been postponed, Daring Cities has become the conference of the cities on the climate emergency. Ambitious sustainable action cannot be postponed, but instead must be accelerated in time of crisis. Together, we have surfaced extraordinary trends and developments happening on the ground and we shone a light on bold local commitments and actions that address the climate emergency. Without the need to travel, on-the-ground implementers have been able to exchange their experiences, helping others to replicate their success and learn from their efforts. Local leaders and policymakers have been able to reaffirm and jointly commit to more ambitious climate action. From the last 3 weeks, we see three distinct outcomes. The first is that cities and regions are already acting on the climate emergency. Daring cities are cities or regions that are taking exceptional climate mitigation measures and ensure an enhanced resilience of our communities. They are jurisdictions who are making structural and systemic changes to achieve climate neutrality. They are responding to their residents who have taken the call for immediate climate action to the streets. Daring cities are finding ways to embed climate action in the heart of their COVID-19 recovery plans, and they prioritize equity-based approaches in order to alleviate the social inequalities and vulnerabilities in their communities. ICLEI works with nearly 1,000 cities and regions that have committed to one or more forms of ambitious and daring climate action. This includes declaring a climate emergency, adopting carbon neutral targets, divesting from fossil fuels, or transitioning to 100% renewable energy. As a unique example, all local governments in the Republic of Korea have declared a climate emergency over the course of 2020. Daring cities revealed that many more cities have the potential to move in these directions and to turn their commitments into action. The second outcome is that a daring approach drives momentum to respond to the climate emergency. A daring approach means to know more, act better, and lead together. Knowing more is a prerequisite for any city or region daring to take bold climate commitments and actions. Cities and regions must have access to and be enabled to turn relevant scientific findings and knowledge into local policy making. And more importantly, local policymakers must be able to communicate the need for change to their residents and stakeholders, to convince them and to include them in the transformation. Knowing more is a prerequisite to dare to acting better. Throughout Daring Cities 2020, urban leaders from across contexts shared their bold commitments and strategies. They showcased that it is realistic to achieve climate neutrality in an equitable and timely manner. As the world responds to the COVID-19 pandemic, many cities strive to not simply build back better, but to go a step further and pursue true redesign. A concept that has been taken up by the government of Japan that supports its local governments in the systemic change of society to combat climate change and to recover from the pandemic. The many innovative and ambitious climate actions and policies being implemented around the world are as diverse as the daring cities, towns, and regions responsible for them. This is critical because such a wide and diverse range of policies is required to meet the ambitious climate targets that we must achieve. I will highlight just a couple of these examples. Turku in Finland is on track to achieve climate neutrality by 2029 and put its efforts to cut consumption-based emissions through a 1.5-degree lifestyle. Recife in Brazil incorporates the increased vulnerability of its residents as well as the realities of the informal sector into its ambitious climate planning. Delhi in India pursues aggressive approaches across multiple sectors to tackle the urban air pollution. Whilst we heard from many more cities and regions that dare to take bold action, it also becomes clear that they can do more when leading together with other levels of government, with civil society stakeholders, and with the finance sector. In Japan, the National Ministry of Environment is building a strong partnership with their local governments to advance a joint 2050 zero carbon goal. The government of Dominica is rolling out an ambitious plan with 20 resilience targets to become the world's first climate resilient nation by 2030. Chile, the country that is leading the climate negotiations until next year, has demonstrated its leadership by presenting a new NDC, which refers to sustainable cities as one of its top priority areas for new investments. And Rwanda, the new NDC from Rwanda, as the first from the African continent, recognizes multi-level and collaborative action. More than half of the countries that are planning to advance their national climate plans through the NDC partnership do have a subnational component now. Here, ICLE is playing a major role in supporting 7 countries in Africa and in South America in this field. When it comes to innovative financing, the City Climate Finance Gap Fund is now set up to support early phase urban climate projects. It showcases partnership in leadership, as it includes the World Bank, the European Investment Bank, national governments, and a variety of local government networks such as ICLE and the Global Covenant of Mayors. Leading together also means leading with citizens, such as showcased by Bonn and Milwaukee, where citizens are co-creating ambitious climate action and policy making with the local authorities. We also partnered with TED and the Future Stewards to bring the Global Countdown Initiative to Daring Cities 2020. Countdown officially launched on the 10th of October and was watched by 15 million people. The event brought together diverse voices, some of whom we heard from also here at the TEDx Daring Cities, to reach a broad global audience about the challenges and solutions for climate change. Finally, the third outcome is that local and regional governments need, demand, and deserve this convening place for integrated and supported local action. It is not a coincidence that there were 100 sessions at Daring Cities 2020. When we took this idea to our networks of local, or to our network of local and regional governments, as well as to our partners, the answer was resounding. Yes, we want this space to reflect, to collaborate, and to accelerate. Not just as your usual climate conference, but instead with a focus on the urgency to act and also integrating such areas that maybe at a first glance might seem unconventional in relation to climate action. It meant for us to elevate the discussions on climate issues to a holistic dialogue and to include other areas such as biodiversity and nature-based solutions, waste minimization and the circular economy, sustainable urban mobility and ecologistics, and sustainable public procurement into the solutions. To a degree unprecedented by any other local government event, Daring Cities 2020 has convened the right people around the same table to advance comprehensive and urgent actions to tackle the climate crisis. As we enter the decade for sustainability action, we have to be decisive to ensure that progress is achieved and is accelerated. With the broad mobilization, enthusiasm, and solid outcomes of this year, I believe that the Daring Cities Forum is now positioned as an effective platform to keep momentum at the local level, to attain our goals, and to make sure that ambition continue to increase during this decade. Thank you very, very much for your attention. Back to you, Marina.
Thank you, Gino. And let me just pause for a moment and really congratulate you and all your partner and your team for this amazing event. I mean, the number you gave us in terms of national government participation, local and regional, and also civil society and international organization is really impressive, and show that your theme, you know, the daring city, is really pointing to is the right narrative, and in a way it's also aligned with our turning point for people for planet, and as many, you know, speakers, including the mayor of Montreal, also mentioned, this is a critical moment, is a critical juncture. So I think there is a very large movement of daring individual and institution. And I think it's amazing your effort to bring all together. But let me also, want to repeat what you said, really capture my mind in terms of know more, act better, and lead together. I think you kind of summarize a very, very practical but visionary, strategy forward that each one of us, regardless of our institution, can really do. And I feel that I also really appreciate what you said, from moving from declaring, climate emergency into making some very concrete plans of what we can change to address the situation. And I think this is extremely important. And I'm sure that the Friday for Future movement is very proud of this shift, and you will have many citizens, behind. So thank you again. And now let me turn to another speaker, and it's actually good to go below the Mediterranean to Africa. And it's really an honor to give the floor to Abishuti Yafet, who is the Chief Resilient Officer, or maybe next year will be the Chief Daring Officer of the city of Kigali in Rwanda. And both Kigali and Rwanda, you've been a kind of a powerhouse for progress and sustainability in Africa. And it's really, we look forward to hear from you. You have the floor.
Marina, I just would like to say that we actually have been able to elevate ourselves, and we are joined by the mayor himself from Kigali. So it is really great to have you, sir, with us this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us and to speak to us from Kigali. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good evening, good morning to everybody. I'm very honored, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, fellow mayors. I'm really honored to join you today during this closing plenary at ICLE Daring Cities Congress 2020. As local leaders, we are inspired actually to join hands with all actors across the globe in tackling the three interlinked challenges of the climate change emergencies, the biodiversity crisis, and the current COVID-19 pandemic, because we believe that, as it has been actually highlighted by other speakers, that together is the only way forward. Let me again come back to that. Actually, I want also to thank very much the SG of ICLE, the Mayor of Bonn, for having organized successfully this Congress. Over the last 3 weeks, we witnessed actually how global cities have taken a bold and decisive actions to tackle the climate change emergencies, and how this has been actually enabled by strong and inclusive national governments. In Rwanda particularly, the city of Kigali works hand in hand with the central government our counterparts, our line ministries, in achieving our commitments towards the climate change response. As many of you might know, Rwanda was the first least developed country to submit its revised national determined contribution in 2020. Given that, we do not have time to waste. Actually, time is it matters a lot, and our national determined contribution is action-oriented. It is really factored into our performance contract at both central and also local government levels. We are very conscious that this is a decade of action. This is why the National Determined Contribution sets out a clear monitoring, reporting, and verification framework, which allows actually a timely tracking of climate finance flows for the National Determined Contribution implementation. It is also integrates what I can call sector-specific implementation plans, and also it links envisaged actions to the sustainable development goals that we as a city, as a country, have subscribed to. So commitments in Rwanda NDCs can also be realized with funds availability. You understand that also we can be having that very good plan, ambitious plan to achieve it, but it requires some funding. So to be generated with both the public and the private sectors. Additional to significant resources allocated by the government to climate change, relevant strategies, the country will continue to rely on existing climate finance tools and international market mechanisms to meet its conditional contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, we expect that through the Rwandan Green Fund, the so-called FONERWA, technical and financial support to the best public and private low carbon projects will unfailingly be provided on top of the leveraging investment that we are trying to bring on board. We welcome the intense discussions held here during the Daring Cities in terms of how more climate finance can flow to cities, where climate change impacts are accurately felt, and also where most greenhouse gas emissions are consumed. While in Kigali City, with the entire government of Rwanda, we are looking forward to co-host the upcoming ICLE Africa's Local Climate Solutions for Africa Virtual Congress. This is happening next week, in which the discussions held during Daring Cities actually will be advanced. And also I would personally wish to welcome one of all of us here to join the next meeting, the next Congress, I mean, in the virtual lobby at LOX Africa 2020, beginning on next Tuesday on the 3rd November 2020. The theme of this 5th edition is Finance for Change. As I said earlier, we need to mobilize resources actually to contribute to this very ambitious plan that is leading us to a level of mitigating the climate change. We really anticipate also to spend 8 days during the next coming week discussing innovative mechanisms and also some tangible actions that would enable the redesign of our cities to be in harmony with the nature. And I would say also cities that are healthy and equitable while constantly building resilience to climate change. On behalf of the city of Kigali, I would like to thank ICLE, as I said, for the role that really they have played in 2020 to ensure that momentum in tackling climate change continues to be gained, particularly in convening congresses such as this one, the present Daring Cities, and also the upcoming LOX for Africa. I want again to thank the Lord Mayor for Bonn for having also successfully contributed to this, to organizing this Congress. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all very much, and I invite you to join us next week during the Congress. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for bringing to the table a very important issue, the issue of climate finance, and also for reminding us of the importance, particularly of those cities that have to deal with the consequences of carbon emission, and without having any responsibility, that it's really important to bring this issue to the table and to actually unite and brainstorm together on how innovative financing can play a role, and how this movement of cities and also of government can really, through cooperation and global solidarity, address some of these injustice, phenomenon. So thank you for showing your leadership, and actually I'm sure that many of the people and mayors and leaders watching this event will continue to do so next week. So thank you, Mayor. And now let me bring you back to Europe, and it's really an honor to me to give the floor to the Mayor of Malmö. And the city of Malmö is not only a front runner when it comes to sustainability and sustainable cities, but Malmö will host, next year, a very important conference where ICLEI will redefine its strategic plan and priorities. And I really hope that the daring concept will be, front and center. And now it's really a pleasure for me to give the floor to the mayor, Miss, Catherine Center Yamme. Apology.
ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability, is a worldwide network of thousands of cities, like here, the city of Malmö, Sweden, that are committed to finding ways to protect our planet for people, life and livelihoods. At the ICLEI World Congress 2021 in Malmö, Sweden, local governments and our partners have an incredible chance to learn, connect and exchange experiences. Together, we can take the next step towards a sustainable future. The city of Malmö is a strong local player in the global arena, a vibrant city with a young, diverse and creative population that values social and environmental consciousness. We are a modern, green coastal city and a first mover when it comes to sustainable urban development. In our city, we see new climate-smart city districts emerging and all areas being improved using new environmental technology. Our city has sky-high ambitions, but we will always aim higher. Every step towards a greener, more sustainable future is one worth taking. My name is Katrin Stjernfeldt Jamme. As the Mayor of Malmö, I'm proud to welcome you to the ICLEI World Congress 2021. I'm looking forward to sharing with you how we are accelerating our work to create a green, healthy, equitable city with good living conditions for all our residents. To increase the pace of innovation, the pace of change, we need to work closely together, locally as well as globally. So, welcome to Malmö.
Join us in April. Find out more at worldcongress2021.iclei.org.
So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from the city of Malmö, Sweden. Over the past 3 weeks, my colleagues and I have had the pleasure of participating in Daring Cities 2020 sessions, learning about the innovative action that cities, towns, and regions around the world are taking to achieve their ambitious climate goals. Here in Malmö, we are proud to say that we have been doing the same, and we strive to embody the spirit of a true daring city. In Malmö, we understand the importance of knowing more. Malmö lies at the heart of the Öresund region, an area ranked as the most knowledge intensive in Northern Europe, which is with its 14 universities and colleges, and over 160,000 students and 12,000 researchers. We actively work together with our local academic and research partners in our climate action work, making sure that we understand the risks and challenges facing us today as well as tomorrow, and planning actively and accordingly in a climate smart way. We also strive to act better, pursuing ambitious climate action that drives us towards achieving our targets of the entire municipality running on 100% renewable energy by 2030. However, we do not only focus on the climate aspect of these actions and policies, but also on how we can use them to further improve our overall sustainability performance through minimizing our resource consumption, improving the quality and extent of biodiversity and nature, and ensuring that policies are planned and implemented equitably and inclusively. An example of how we are doing this is that of an area in the northern part of Malmö called Segerpark. The area is going to be transformed into a sustainable district, presenting innovative solutions for renewable energy and where urban farming plays an important role. In 2030, more than 1,000 people will live in this resource-efficient, affordable, and climate-friendly city district. The cultural and historical environment, which dates back to the 1930s, will be preserved, combined with the modern solutions for a sustainable lifestyle. And just last week, Malmö had the honor of receiving the European Commission's Fair and Ethical Trade Award. And having been named the European Union's Sustainable Trade Champion of the Year is a good sign that our hard work is paying off and that we are now hopefully seen as a role models for other cities that are in the process of focusing more on sustainable forms of trade. This is just one example of how our city has worked in a structured way for many years in order to ensure that all aspects of our municipality, including the purchases of goods, are geared towards sustainability. And finally, we value the value of leading together. Through our partnership with networks such as ICLEI, we have constantly been a strong advocate for sustainable local action at the European and the international levels. Malmö has actively pursued ambitious sustainability policies for decades. And over the course of our journey, we have compiled a plethora of learnings that we are eager to share with our peers. In Malmö, we believe in exchange of knowledge, help us to improve and allow a good idea to be spread. And every year, with the special exception of 2020, our city has received thousands of delegates who want to study and learn about our work on sustainable urban development. And we are indeed eager to share. The climate emergency is a global crisis, but through local actions, we can make sustainability a reality. And only by sharing our learnings and experiences with one another can we truly drive forward the innovation needed to tackle these global challenges. It is for this very reason that the city of Malmö is so excited to host the ICLEI World Congress 2021 this coming up April. We want to share our experiences and initiatives with the world, and in return learn about the cutting edge work that others are doing all around the world.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have had to, unfortunately, take the decision that the ICLE World Congress 2020 will not be an in-person event, but rather a virtual one. We are actively working on ways to digitally showcase all that Malmö has to offer in sustainability, and we hope to be able to welcome you all in person in the near future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for really also talking about very concrete example of sustainability and also to see how a city can really reinvent and create a new sustainability environment where people can experience what sustainability means. And so thank you. And we look forward to the next Congress in 2021. And now it's really an honor for me to move to a very important topic as part of the climate conversation, which is resilience, and which is very important in the way we recover from the crisis and we really address the sustainability at the root causes. And let me, it's really a pleasure for me to now welcome and give the floor to the special representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, Ms. Mami Mitsutori, and I will welcome her to the event and ask her if she can talk more about a very exciting and visionary campaign which has been launched. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to congratulate ICLE and your Secretary General, my dear friend Gino, for concluding this ambitious and indeed daring marathon forum of 3 weeks. I had the honor to take part in one of your events 2 weeks ago, which actually seems quite a long time ago in these exceptional times, but you have been powering through until today. And indeed, this is a very extraordinary time that we are living in. The very fabric of our lives has been strained and stretched to breaking points by a tiny invisible virus that has brought the world to its knees. And we are yet to see how this story will end. The COVID-19 pandemic and resulting economic disaster have had catastrophic effects. City leaders, representatives gathered here today have seen firsthand the devastation that a disaster of this nature can wreak on your communities and your people. And tragically, there is no denying that we knew this was going to come, just as we can anticipate many of the hazards that we face, and just as we know that the impact of climate emergency is here to stay. And we know that there is no vaccine for climate emergency, nor can we self-isolate ourselves from climate emergency. For many years, we have treated disaster as a question of if rather than a question of when, but there is no more excuse for ignorance or neglect in a connected and informed world, and there is no excuse not to build resilience. 90% of major disasters during the past 20 years were related to climate emergency. We know it and we have been devastated by them. And now many cities are being exposed to extreme weather events while fighting COVID-19. The realization of how much cities are exposed to the simultaneous threat of multiple and cascading risks adds a whole new layer of responsibility and urgency to getting disaster risk governance right in urban settings and make urban settings resilient. The picture is dire, but as Gino just shared with us in his excellent summary of the Daring Cities 2020, while cities are at the forefront of preparing, responding, and recovering from disasters, they are already, the good news is, at the forefront of innovation. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction recognizes the important role of cities in reducing disaster risks and building resilience, as well as addressing climate risks and achieving the SDGs. Over the past 10 years, the Making Cities Resilient campaign has been successful in promoting a risk-informed approach to development planning and raising awareness for the need to build resilience. Some 4,300 cities are now part of the campaign, while 868 cities around the world have used the tools that the campaign has provided. And a lot of awareness has been raised, and especially during this challenging time of COVID-19, that prevention saves lives, resilience saves lives. Now, as the campaign concludes at the end of this year, and as was shared right now to all of you, I'm happy to announce that the next phase of the campaign, which is called Making City Resilient 2030, was launched just a few hours ago as part of the closing day of Daring Cities 2020. We had more than 800 participants from around the world. Strong commitments from the core partners of the new initiative were made, and representatives of both national and local governments shared what they had done during the past 10 years in the Making Cities Resilient campaign, and also shared what they will do more during the Decade of Action in the new MCR 2030. So I would like to take this opportunity to invite all of you to join and be part of the MCR 2030 starting in January next year, continuing to the end of the Decade of Action. MCR 2030 will support you, mayors, representatives of local governments, urban planners, and community members to achieve risk-informed development and build resilience in your cities, in your communities, by implementing sound and inclusive strategies for disaster risk reduction. It will provide a space for sharing tools and resources for city-to-city learning, which is the best way to learn, and for enhancing partnership and collaboration. We will make our utmost efforts so that through MCR 2030, no city, no one will be left behind. And as many of you have already mentioned, we can only do this together. We can only build resilience together against climate risk and all other disaster risk. And we need to change this crisis into an opportunity for building resilience. So thank you very much for inviting me to say a few words at this plenary session. And once again, many congratulations to ICLEI and all the cities that have joined in the 3-week marathon feat. Thank you.
Thank you for relaunching again in this closing session the campaign. I think for the Decade of Action towards 2030, we need networks and campaign like yours, and we will be happy to support as much as we can. And really, it's really important to put the spotlight on resilience, which is what we can do to build strong and more inclusive societies and communities. So then, whatever pandemic or climate emergency will come, we will be equipped to survive and continue to thrive. So thank you. And now let me slowly approaching towards the end of the session. I think we are now extremely honored to give the floor to the Mayor of Glasgow, who will be on the spotlight next year hosting the COP26. So it's really an honor to hear from her, Susan Aiken, some of the vision, some of the perspective and the commitment that comes from her city hosting such an important event. Madam Mayor, you have the floor.
Daring Cities, indeed Glasgow's continuing participation with ICLEI, has provided us with a platform of real purpose and focus on which to make common cause, to share and to collaborate on those solutions that we as cities can deliver to meet the challenges of the climate emergency. In Glasgow right now, there's a real sense of momentum as we build up to 1 year to go to COP26. We must hope and trust that the nation states that come together in Scotland next year will ensure that it is an event of generational importance for our planet. But whatever is pledged by national leaders in 2021, it will be us as city and local leaders who will deliver. With more than half the world's population now living in cities, this is where the solutions to the global climate emergency will have to be delivered at local level. It's we who as local leaders must dare to make the changes. I want to leave you with some timescales to crystallise that point. The Independent Committee on Climate Change recommended that the UK achieves carbon neutrality by 2050. For Scotland, the target is 2045. Here in Glasgow, we've set ourselves the deliverable target of 2030. That's what cities can do. This is the impact that we can make. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this message shows to the full extent the daring concept. So show really the success of this event, not just a conference, but how it has spurred action and has accelerated action. So it's really self-evident how this event has shown the role that cities can play and the role that cities can play together with all the different stakeholders. So it's really, it has been really an honor to be part and involved, and also to hear so many commitments, not only to climate, but to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I look forward to continuing the path together. So now let me hand over back to Yunus for the last dialogue, and really you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Ponti. It was truly a pleasure for us to have your leadership in facilitating this dialogue. And as you have said, we are thinking that this is not the end, in fact, this event, but it is just kicking off numerous initiatives, new partnerships, and we will continue to work with the SDG Action Campaign in this regard. So in the beginning of the Daring Cities opening plenary, we had also UN agencies, ministers, but we also have talked with scientists, the youth and initiatives, the youth major groups as well. In today's closing plenary, we wanted to follow the same spirit that the efforts of Daring Cities cannot be only among the national governments, but it should be together with civil society and also the public enforcement of authorities. In this regard, I would like to now invite two of our colleagues joining us in this last 20 minutes or so for a dialogue, in the sense that we will try to hear their perspectives. So we have Farhana Yamin joining us from the UK, and we have Craig Segal from California. I would like to first start with Farhana Yamin. Farhana has been has developed her career and have her lifetime experience with the UNFCCC starting from 1992, and we have been following her in the corridors of the UNFCCC over these years, and she has been one of the passionate advocates, and now she's following another path with the civil society. What I would like to first start with, Farhana, is how do you see the new architecture of climate action and governance? You have heard from ministers and the UN that now there's a new momentum, especially with engaging bottom-up initiatives. Are we on the right track? And if yes, how can we accelerate? And if not, what else we have to do? Please, the floor is yours, Farhana.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm in London. I hope my Wi-Fi connection holds up. And I want to thank ICLEI and all of the people who've participated. I was looking at some of the numbers and been listening to this last session, and in answer to your question, you know, the innovation that you've done in the last week is part of the way in which the new governance, the new architecture of how we will do cooperation around this enormous challenge, but also this enormous opportunity for humanity. So when I started back in 1991, actually, and I'm now completely, my photos are completely different. I've gone grey in the last 26 years. And I've been to 24 of the last, 25 COPs that we've had and all the sort of UN summits. And we started off very state-centric. very much scientists, meteorologists alerted the world to this problem, and the UN convened meetings back in the early 90s, which led to the convention. It was a few thousand people at the very most, 3,000, I think, were the first set of meetings, and mainly environment ministers came. And then after Kyoto, you had a huge influx of economists, people from the city, people who were dealing with financial issues, because it was realized we needed to tap into markets and finance. And you had then a big infusion of sort of economic actors in a very big way. And I would say the economists kind of started to take over, so, we lawyers and economists and other experts. And then broadly speaking, jumping forward to sort of Paris, what you have is an explosion of stakeholders, an explosion of expertise, an explosion of interest. And you very much, with ICLE and with many others, C40 and others, who are not that old, they don't feature in the participants lists of COPs from 20 years ago. You're quite young, all of you. So all of these efforts have meant that we can engage many different levels of society, ranging from the traditional NGO groups down to cities, wards, universities, students. All of the main UN groups have always been sort of present, but actually more active now as a result of these governance changes. And my own sort of career has very much sort of mirrored and followed that. So I was very much a sort of government advisor and a government strategist, never spoke except, give talking points and advice to the ministers and the heads of delegation, to really being more engaged as a mother. I'm a mother of 4 children, and as an academic, as well as, participating increasingly as a rather vocal member of, for example, Extinction Rebellion. So we're coming up to the 2nd anniversary of Extinction Rebellion's October in 2018, which Greta Thunberg, then unknown actually, for the most part, came to in October of this year. And I'd sort of heard of them, this is 2 years ago, and I thought, everyone else is responding to the publication of this IPCC report on the 1.5 pathways, which we finally got out of as a result of, a lot of compromises and horse trading in Paris. But here was this group actually sort of saying, we're ready to get arrested because this report, the importance of the 1.5, the importance of having only 10 years left is overwhelming. And your COPs haven't really delivered. And I thought, they're right. They're absolutely right. We got the report, but where is the action? And the UK at that time had not done its homework and had not legislated for net zero by 2050, which they did then a year later. So I think citizens, our youth have made an enormous injection of energy and are making enormous demands of us to think and act differently. We all have to think and act differently. And that's one of the new experiments that we're also trialing in London, in the area that I live, is called Camden. So as a result, again, of some of this injection, this infusion of democratizing expertise, we had a citizens' assembly, a formal citizens' assembly in Camden, and the council then listened to what the citizens' assembly had deliberated on and agreed a 2030 target, which we're now in the process of working out how to implement that and take that forward. And it's rolled out what I call think and do spaces, which was an idea that some of us, have put together, which is essentially using premises on the high street, in this case, a disused cafe, opening it back up and subversively not selling anything in it. So you go into a shop, but you don't buy anything. You actually take part in lots of discussions, workshops, projects. You think of new ideas. And I think it ties in with the enormous way in which we can tap into the imagination and the desire for collaboration that's coming from citizens, and the not wanting to be treated just as consumers or just as taxpayers, which we sort of have done in the traditional COPs. And my sort of big, turning to COP26, I would say the most important thing for us to realize is for, historically large polluters and for richer countries, 2030 is the new 2050. 2050 was a global date. There is no way that you should be using 2050 if you're in a richer country and you have got the resources and the energy and you've got your citizens behind you. So you should be aiming for 2030 as a full phase out. If you don't get there, that's okay. We'll forgive you. I'm sure the other future generations will forgive you for bringing about all sorts of benefits. And I think also community, I would say, is the new COP. That's my mantra. Community is the new COP. You know, instead of all of us spending this enormous amount of time, you know, tens and thousands of people having side events, which sometimes are very poorly attended, very poorly watched. You know, let's do more of what you've just done and bring lots and lots of people from all around the world together. I think online events can complement in-person events. I hope we will go back to some of the in-person events. But the desire after COVID, we're still in the middle of it, but the desire really is to have hyper-local imaginings, to have hyper-local initiatives, to have a sort of permissionless energy to the kind of collaborations that are needed and necessary. So I would say that, you know, we should stop thinking of the COPs as the big feature in our diaries, which they always are. And we should start thinking about the everyday, the local, the hyper-local, tap into our identities as mothers, as activists, and not just as climate geeks and attendees and government delegates. And I would say the final sort of comment that I wanted to make in terms of where is, you know, Paris gave us the North Star of net zero by 2050, but where are the other compass points, you know? So I've been developing some of those, and I think in the age, again, of COVID and economic collapse in many countries, the debt crisis, you know, social equality, racial justice, the legacies that have been left and scarred society still are very evident. And those are going to have to be part and parcel of the way in which we look at climate. So for me, climate justice is social justice, is racial justice, and we must put all of those as the compass points of what we're going forward and doing, and start debunking some of the vocabularies that we use, for example, mitigation and adaptation, and just start, you know, using the vocabularies that people understand, which is essentially restoration and renewal, you know, restoration of nature which we damaged hugely, restoring the lands which belong to indigenous people and which are still legally theirs, but which we legally don't recognize. So some of those compass points have been missing. And I think that those are the key points, which if we get them, if we all agree them, then, you know, we'll have a much better journey through the new architecture, through the new landscape. And I hope to take part, you know, and still be around, you know, hopefully in 25 more years and see all the amazing things that we've achieved and to celebrate with you, Eunice. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thanks.
No, it's truly a pleasure. Especially, it's an opportunity for us to hear from your, let's say, experience and vision, and this positive spirit that we are in the right direction, as we have said that it's a new era. And especially, I liked your analogy that it is the community, not the COP, and I think that fits the spirit, as you have heard from the mayor of Kigali, that NDC is making him enabling the delivery of services and bringing livelihoods to a better situation, and in fact that is the main spirit, that COP should be the result, not the aim. Therefore the real action should be at home, and that's why we are trying to connect the Japan NDCs, the Chilean NDCs, so that these kind of progress should be done beforehand, and then the results should be just delivered at COP. And with the new technologies, probably we will have more opportunities. So thanks a lot, Farhana, and we will stay in touch, especially to hear your experience in the connection of citizen activism. But maybe you can give a couple of more minutes so that we continue with Craig, and maybe in the last round we can have one more minute from your side as a concluding remark. But now I would like to go to the Pacific coast of the US. Craig is joining us, and we particularly thank him for the early hours of the day. He has been following us. We started in the beginning of the conference with the consular-elect Kevin DeLeon from California, who has been the president of the Senate of California as well, but he's now the member of the Council of the Los Angeles City. Therefore, it's a great pleasure to conclude with another California representative. Craig has a different pathway, let's say. He had been spending his passion and activism with the Sierra Club for a long time, and he has now moved to an important body, which is California Air Resources Board. And in fact, Farhana's direction was from negotiations, governance to citizens, but now Craig has moved to governance from a citizen background. And Craig, maybe you can tell us why it's important to have new ways of governance and how the example or experience of California is now enabling us to be positive that we can implement these decisions and we can make sure monitoring is achieved. Craig, the floor is yours.
Of course, and thank you for having me. The energy of this conference is more than enough to keep someone awake, even in early hours. It is a pleasure to see the work being done. What I think I want to speak to today echoes some of the themes we heard this morning. You know, from Kigali to Malmö to Montreal to Glasgow, there's a shared interest in the structures of governance and how they empower citizen activism, to build on some of Farhana's themes about how we deepen this work into community and into justice. And much of this has been the work that CARB and California have been engaged in. So I think I have a few lessons to share, but also much to learn from everyone here. As I'm sure you all know, Scotland and California are co-chairs of the Under 2 MOU Secretariat. And one of the real hopes is to continue working with ICLE and others and with the sort of parallel body in the US Climate Alliance, as we collectively try to ramp up both climate ambition and democratic change. So the theme of this conference, Daring Cities, is especially apt for CARB, because CARB, now the climate regulator for the world's 5th largest economy, began in an act of daring in a city. We were created to manage the smog problem in Los Angeles and have slowly expanded as we've recognized that everything is tied to everything else, and that to truly think deeply both about environmental activism and climate change, but also about the larger structure of our governance, requires this sort of deep concern with interactions on every level, from city to subnational to nation state to the international community, and to engage the community at every level of those. So to give you some flavor for this, California's climate ambitions are large. We will be phasing out internal combustion engines by the mid-2030s. We're on track for carbon neutrality by 2045, if not earlier. And that means an engagement across every level of society, while maintaining enforcement and governance, both above us toward the federal government and in partnership with our local partners. Federally, even as the US government has retreated in some ways from climate change, California and the states have continued to insist on legal enforcement of the nation's laws. So we've been in court something like 30 times to insist upon climate action within the US, and we've won those cases on the whole. But we've also been working with localities to ensure that they can both adopt policies that work and benefit from each other on climate change. I'll give you some for instances. Within the California system, we've already invested on the order of $10 billion in carbon market revenues in local governments. 2/3 of those go into disadvantaged communities, because we recognize that it is in sacrifice zones, in disadvantaged communities and marginalized communities, that the climate crisis has taken root. Those who've borne the brunt of what's already happened, those who bear the brunt of the risk going forward. But these are the same frontline communities that have the vision we need to really move forward. So those investments are not just in physical infrastructure, they're in democratic infrastructure. We have funded community groups across the state to build emission reduction programs for their own particular communities, whether that's a port community, whether that's a desert community on the Mexican border, whether that's an urban community next to a refinery, and to work with us actively, funding them to have the tools to monitor, to discuss, to come to these meetings, and to build plans for themselves. So our California experiment is not just one in funding and legal construction. It is one in active community partnership, and we are profoundly committed to this just transition work. The California statute called AB 617 is one that we would be delighted to work with others to pioneer. The hope is to really share this experience in deeply democratizing climate law and governments going forward. I'll note 2 other pieces of this. One is our recognition that the climate crisis, as Farhana and many others have noted, is ultimately not an isolated crisis. It is a question about governance under our civil rights laws. It is a question about governance under our basic principles of democracy. How do we ensure voices are heard, that governments and agencies are not captured, and that communities who have been ignored can be heard? So we have adopted as a principle through our board a fundamentally anti-racist orientation and one geared toward equity in everything we do. The recognition is that stable governance fundamentally has to be equitable governance. The other point I'll note is that we are recognizing that because the crisis stems from every possible center, there's no one level in which it must be solved, it requires new structures of governance. So this is a hope to think, for instance, in California, we're actively working on addressing the housing crisis here, where housing is far too expensive, but partnering with the road building agencies, with transport agencies, with housing agencies, and with local governments, helping construct climate plans for those governments that can produce not just engagement, but denser, greener, more affordable, more equitable cities that can address these challenges. Similarly, as we begin to think about the COVID crisis, we're partnering with health agencies, looking seriously at COVID risk, now amplified in California by climate risk as wildfire smoke pours into our cities. So what we're learning here, and what is exciting about this conference and the efforts ICLEI has created, is that these synthetic crises that cross borders are also opportunities for us all. The fate of the world really hinges on actions we take in the next decade. The next 10,000 years of climate depend on it. And because that is a shared human crisis, it means it's a shared crisis not just of governance, but of community voices and an opportunity for us all. And we are very eager to partner with everyone to drive that opportunity forward in a democratic and equitable way.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig. I think that was an excellent bridging, for example, that the problems are the same. I mean, be it in housing in Kigali, housing in Malmö, in housing in California, that the solutions are also the same. So that powerful message, and that it is a collective effort, is really giving us the momentum that, yes, this new world is in the making, and therefore we have to invest time, and we have to trust, and we have to work together. Maybe then the last 1 minute to Farhana and you is also in the sense that on the way to COP, maybe Farhana, you can share with us what exactly would be your plan in the UK, because you have an advantage that you will not have to travel too long, but that was what you were messaging, is that what exactly change you would like to see in the next couple of months, so that you can share before going to COP from your Camden Town, and the same goes to Craig, so that we can conclude this round.
I mean, personally, my energy is going into setting up more and more spaces where people can come together, whether they're part of an existing NGO network, whether they've never done any activism, whether they're, really making it possible for people during these COVID times to tap into their generosity, to tap into their desire for a much better, greener, kinder, more nature-friendly world than they've been able to articulate and voice before. So I think this is a massive opportunity for us to really engage with people. My energy is also going into creating the new commons and again at the local level. So the history of the last 400 years, broadly speaking, is the diminishing of the commons, of what we held in common. It's either become nationalized or controlled by the state, or then we've said the private sector and privatization has taken over many resources that were held in common. So if you don't have those common spaces, you have to invent them. And some of that, the new infrastructure, roads, parking spaces can be seen as the new commons. They don't have to be reserved for private utility. Cars are a typical example. And COVID, for example, streets are being taken over for cafes, restaurants, play streets, closed down for other forms of mobility. So yeah, I'm putting a lot of energy in that, because I think my mistake as a lawyer was to think that if we just spelt it all out in a report and it came with the stamp of experts, policymakers and the public would understand it. You don't. You have to change the facts on the ground. You have to take people with you, and they have to be part of that journey and make that change real for themselves. So, in law we say possession is 9/10 of the law. So let's make every high street look very different by the time COP26 comes along, and we'll be in a much better place.
Thanks. Excellent. This brings me to this discussion that originally at the beginning of this COVID, there was this phrase social distancing, but then it was wrong because maybe we may be physically distant, but socially we're much more united. And that is the power that we have to build upon. And I think your new engaging and empowering new communities is excellently, that is the right thing we have to do. Maybe Craig, the last words from your side, and we will wrap up this session. Thank you. Yep, Craig, the floor is yours.
What I will say as we approach the COP is that Californians have always been dedicated to leading into a future and making it. And I think that's true of our collective work here. It is how can we listen to the world's democratic community, which is demanding decarbonization and demanding a just transition. We know we can embed this in law, but we know that the law ultimately follows democratic will. So our hope is to partner with everyone to share our expertise, but ultimately to amplify the voices we're hearing today from around the world to drive us toward that better future. Thank you.
Excellent. For both of you, I think that was an excellent conclusion of our 3 weeks with a positive note that the local and the urban leaders should, the more they engage with their citizens, their authorities, the more they can be confident that they can deliver the results and they can be hopefully also re-elected as well. So with these remarks, I think it's a good time for us to say that this Daring Cities is over. I also would like to recognize all the support for our translators for this session, Spanish to Portuguese, but also throughout this 3 weeks. Without their help, we would not be able to communicate. From ICLEI's Daring Cities studio, this is the last time we're addressing you, but on behalf of the whole ICLEI family, all around the world, all our members, all our leaders, we are proud that Daring Cities is now the new normal and would like to continue this journey with you in the next 10 years so that we can leave the world that our citizens, our generations to come to, that they deserve and they enjoy as well. So with these remarks, thank you, goodbye, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you, wherever you are connected.
Thank you.